Good morning, everyone, and many thanks for inviting us. My name is Lennart Ripke, as just introduced. I come from Green-Jakobsen. We are a human performance company based in Denmark. And I would start right away. What drives human performance? Well, we have some idea about that because we have collected a little bit of data. So we have 50,000 survey sets that we have. 37,000 of these have been validated with an algorithm, so we also know that it's good data or not. 2,000 seafarer interviews, 500 onshore, and counting. So we have that data, and what we did is we dived deep into that data. But before I take that dive with you, I would like to go over something that we have discussed just a few weeks ago. And when you see human performance, usually the expectation is that performance goes up. It is pretty much what an investor would expect. It goes steadily up. That's what we all want to see. Well, unfortunately, that's not very true. It usually looks something like this. And there's a survey on that from a totally different industry. It is actually from the medicine industry. It's made on surgeons in the USA and how many incidents they have while they operate, while they have surgery. And if you have a new surgeon starting in the position, about 1% of his surgeries will have a significant or serious incident. Over time, with experience, this goes down, no surprise, to 0.25% roughly. These are a bit rough numbers. Nobody's surprised about that if you do something more often, you get better at it. But what is very surprising is if this experienced surgeon is now transferred to another hospital, it goes up again. And it actually goes up all the way. It goes up to nearly 1% again. The difference between somebody who is new as a surgeon and somebody who's new as a surgeon in a new team, but has a lot of experience as a surgeon, is marginal, is absolutely marginal. And the only interesting thing then is that an experienced surgeon has a better trajectory going back to the 0.25%, a significantly better trajectory. And one of the questions is that just because he is experienced and, so to speak, find his rhythm with a new team? Or is it also because he already had undergone the process finding himself into a new team? And actually, there are some suggestions that the later might be the more significant. The one thing that we usually look at, especially when we are talking about low performance, is individual performance. And we have talked a lot about mentoring, which is actually kind of breaching that part where it gets from the individual performance to a team performance. And I think that one of the things that we really need to do in our industry is we need to focus more on the team performance and organizational performance rather than the individual performance. We have a very high focus on the individual performance and on the technical performance. Well, technical performance aside, I have no clue about that. But on the individual performance, we know that we give a lot of training to our seafarers. We have competence management systems implemented. We are only driving individual performance. But if it is true for our industry as well, what is true for the medicine industry, it might actually be that we need to focus on the team performance, not on the individual performance. And then, of course, bearing in mind that we have a lot of rotation on our vessels, so it might be that this is a big hindrance in growing and developing our performance. Now coming to the data, what we essentially did is we signed up for a theory that is called collective intelligence in terms of performance. So you have two main indicators. You have what we call task reflectivity, and that's exactly as it sounds like. You reflect on the task that you have. It's pretty much the hard skills, so to speak, that you have. And then we have what we call social reflectivity, which is actually pretty much the same thing as psychological safety, and is very, very much linked to well-being on board. And of course, if you have a team that has a low social reflectivity, low psychological safety, and is not focused on their tasks, that's a dysfunctional team. Nothing works. If you have a high degree on focus on the tasks, but not so much on the psychological safety, on the social reflectivity, you get a cold team. You get a team that does not communicate, especially not in critical moments, which usually operates quite okay under standard operations, which can be harnessed, so to speak, by processes and guidelines, best practices as we know them. But these teams tend to fall apart in critical situations where things do not go as planned. Well, if you have a team that is not focused on the task reflectivity, very nice to work in, hardly anything gets done. But unfortunately, that's also not what we want. So obviously we need to get some things done on board. So it doesn't help us if we only have a feel-good vibe on board and do not focus on the tasks at hand. So obviously what we want is, we want to have a high focus on the psychological safety as well as on the tasks at hand. So what we have done is, we have taken all the data that I showed in the very beginning that we collected over the last 8 years, and we have chosen certain criteria for the task reflectivity as well as for the social reflectivity on that from all these surveys. And the data that I present now is all from 2022, so it's fairly recent. And every dot that you see presents a vessel. These are 322 vessels, which is, 320. Okay, sorry, we lost 2. 320 vessels, and as you can see, there is quite a large spread in there in terms of what the industry represents, and the industry in this case is our customers. If you go and look at companies, this is a traditional shipping company, owner-manager, we are working with for 5 years with a high focus on social reflectivity as well as a high focus on task reflectivity. That is actually one of the leading companies in there. This is a new customer of ours where things are obviously way more spread out, and you can see that they have a few vessels that really fall apart in terms of task reflectivity. That is actually a normal ship manager, not an owner manager, just a ship manager. The problem with that company is it's actually a very good company in terms of third-party management. The problem is that they have not a very high retention rate and a very high rotation. And that goes back to where we started this in the medicine industry. We can see actually the same thing happening in the maritime industry, that if you rotate a lot, even if you're very good at procedures, if you're a very good third-party manager in this case, it doesn't help you. Your teams will not perform as well as teams that stick together for a longer time. That is actually a little bit outside company. It's a company that I visited 2 weeks ago, where we had an officer seminar. And the most interesting thing on that one is, as you can see, there's a few vessels that are leaving behind, and I had the presentation to them for the vessels, how they do. It's a tanker company, quite a good tanker company, with SIRE observations under VIQ7 just above 1 in average, so quite good. But you can see that there's a few vessels that are not as good as the others. And the funny thing was, I presented this slide, and the next presenter was the head of vetting, and he presented exactly the same thing, just with vetting results. And then, of course, later on in the evening, with a glass of wine, we sat down and we actually checked, are these vessels that we see there falling apart, are these the same that did fall apart in the vetting? And actually, yes, the lowest dot that you see is the one that scored by far the most observations in their vettings. So that was actually quite interesting. And we didn't knew that before I presented that, because I only spoke to the crewing manager and not to the vetting manager before I made that presentation. So, what does it mean? First of all, that is only an indication. Unfortunately, we have only 3 data points so far with the 3 vessels that did fall apart on the last customer, where we can say, yes, that did predict something. So I hope that there is a link and not just a coincidence. The other part is what we can say for certainty is that if we direct attention to what matters, then things improve. So what actually does drive human performance? Well, it is reviews and obviously asking our seafarers, because they are the ones on board. They know what happens, what actually happens on board. And if we listen to them and let them improve what they think is necessary to improve, that works best. Thank you.